Before we get into the data and data tools that will help us to identify students for an expedited retake, match a student's greatest area of need for the purpose of remediation, and ultimately monitor their student success through the testing window, we first need to have a shared understanding of some terms that are associated with the various data tools and reports surrounding the SOL data. When a child sits to take their SOL exam and they hit submit, Pearson collects their raw data values. That raw data goes through a verification and a certification process. The Office of Student Testing identifies any testing irregularities and makes sure that the correct student information, such as their name, matches their student ID. Once that is established, we then call that pool of data certified data. Something to be mindful of is that through the testing window, we are able to see preliminary results through EDSL using tools like the Expedited Retake Planning Workbook and Expedited Retake Planning Report. Please note that this is preliminary data, which means that it is non-certified. It has not gone through the certification process. These values are values that are pulled directly from those Pearson extracts. So all staff can actually access the student results through EDSL using the Expedited Retake Planning Workbook. However, they need to be mindful that that data is non-certified or preliminary data. The certified pool of data then gets run through two different algorithms. Certified data sets can be found within SIS as well as within EDSL in reports like the multiple year test results comparison report, as well as the number and percent by proficiency reports. There will be a session offered in June to help walk the audience through or users through various reports that can help to inform SIIP reflection. You might want to look for the Building Capacity with Data series within MyPLT for this session. So once that certified data pool has been established, it then goes through two algorithms. The first algorithm is to calculate federal accountability in reading and math. The algorithm includes steps such as removing exempt students as defined by the federal accountability guidelines, as well as adjusting the data, and it results in FAMO values in English performance, math performance, English participation, and math participation. Essentially, once the certified data set is run through the algorithm, we then call that adjusted data. The second algorithm that certified data set goes through is called state accreditation. In state accreditation, the value is calculated using all reading, math, science, and social studies values, except for those students' values that have been adjusted. What that means is that those state values go through an algorithm where the certified data set has certain data that's adjusted out based on absenteeism, cheating, parent refusal. There are also other adjustments, including SOA adjustments, retests, and recovery. What this does is this results in a second adjusted data set for the purpose of calculating state accreditation. So ultimately, we need to be mindful. Are we looking at unadjusted data versus adjusted data for FAMO pass rates and state accreditation? Or are we looking at preliminary data, which is non-certified data? There are basically three places to find SOL data and data tools. There are three platforms, if you will. However, who has access to those platforms is not all the same. Within Pearson, there are published reports and on-demand reports. However, Pearson access is limited to the school testing coordinator and then whom within the school the administration deems should have Pearson access. So there is limited access to the Pearson reports. EDSL, however, is accessible to all staff. Within EDSL, you can find SOL information for the purpose of identifying students for expedited retake planning within the Expedited Retake Planning Workbook, the report, as well as within the Responsive Instruction Worksheet and Responsive Instruction Foresight tools. Please note that the data within these tools is preliminary, which means that it is non-certified data. We can also find results within the Command Center. We can see results based on our district's prediction and values, as well as state accreditation and FAMO accountability. Those reports are also accessible by all staff by accessing the Command Center through the FCPSnet intranet website. So within Pearson then, we have on-demand reports as well as published reports. In the on-demand reports, we see that there are groupings of reports based on what's called the testing group. The testing group often defaults to the teacher's homeroom or the content area teacher's assignment as well as period. When you click on the group name, what you will see is an opportunity to select many different types of reports. The first one, the group list report, looks like this. In the group list report, and this is one that's often given to teachers, we can see the student names, their testing ID, as well as their preliminary results, so their scaled score, their proficiency level, as well as their reporting category scaled scores. The names of the reporting categories are found at the bottom of the page. In the published reports, what we can see are basically three different types of files. The first files here highlighted in green are what we call the extract files. Student data extract files are Excel spreadsheets that are populated with raw data. The student detail by question extract file is an Excel spreadsheet that is populated with raw data on the question performance. However, there are some reports that calculate this information for you. The student detail by question report by school gives you a one-page report for every student listed alphabetically by last name of how the students answered the various different item descriptors within categories. This report does the same, it provides the same information, however, it's only for students who scored below 400. And the last one is the school detail by question summary report. This is the SDBQ analysis for an entire test level. So what this means is if you previously ran the SDBQ sorter, you can actually get this information calculated for you by Pearson by clicking on this report and searching for the test level name. When you're searching through these rather large PDF files, it's recommended that you use the Control-F function or find function to help you find the information you might need. And then lastly, there is a report called the Analysis of Subgroup Performance Report that enables you to be able to see the SOL information broken down by various subgroups. I'm going to show you an example of some of these reports. Here is a student detail by question report, sometimes called the SDBQ report. There is one of these reports for every child that takes an SOL test. What you can see is the name of the test scaled score, as well as the performance level. Within the report, you can also see the categories, as well as the category scaled scores. VDOE defines an area of strength as a scaled score of 30 and above, and an area of weakness as a scaled score below 30. Within each category, you can also see the item descriptors of the items that the child was assessed on. You can see which of the items were scored correctly and their difficulty level, as well as which items were scored incorrectly and their difficulty level. This really helps to provide targeted remediation for a child in helping to prepare them for their expedited retake. This report is very similar to the SDBQ sorter if that's a tool that your school has used in the past. However, the beauty of this is that Pearson basically has calculated this for you. The student detail by question summary report for the school gives a report for each test name that has been given. So for example, the grade 4 mathematics test. You can see the number of tests, the test mean scaled score, as well as the median. And then within each category, what you can see are the mean scaled scores, the median scaled scores for the group, as well as the percent correct by school and division on the various different item descriptors. So this essentially helps to replace the SDBQ sorter. What we have found with this particular report in Pearson is that it's available for testing groups that are larger than just a few students. If the test type or test form rather was given to just a singular student or a couple of students, what you might see are asterisks that appear in the school column. However, if you continue to page through the report till you'll see the report with the highest number of tests here, then you will start to see the values begin to populate within these school percent rows. The last report within Pearson is the Analysis of Subgroup Performance Report by school. What you can see for each test is basically a breakdown by various different subgroups. So we can see, for example, the number of tests that were given, as well as the percent passing rate, the mean scaled score, and then the scaled scores within the reporting categories. You can see this value of 90 broken apart by gender, as well as other calculations such as Gap Group 1, Gap Group 2, Gap Group 3, various other subgroups, your SOA adjustments, your recovery. This is a grade 3 level mathematics CAT test, so there are no recovery in points in 3rd grade because this is the first time that they're taking that test, as well as your retest percentage. Next, I'm going to take you into some data tools and reports in EDSL. EDSL is our Education Decision Support Library, and it's accessible to all staff through the intranet webpage. By logging onto the intranet webpage, you can account sign-on tab, you'll see that it's the very first option. As we move into EDSL, something to be mindful of as you're looking at the data is that all data, student data, is confidential. Everything within EDSL is both FOIA and FERPable. We do ask that you adhere to the AUP policies when you are both viewing this data, discussing this data, as well as if you opt to download the data, please make sure that you're downloading it to a secured network folder, never to your desktop or into Google. So within EDSL, you will come to what we call our EDSL catalog dashboard page. This is the landing page for EDSL. SOL information can basically be found within a few different areas within our Education Decision Support Library. Within the Learning tab, the Planning, and in the Planning tab is typically where you will find these SOL results. The Learning tab is available to all staff. However, there may be limited access to the Planning tabs and Staffing tabs. So within the Learning tab, what we have basically done is we've grouped report based on like data values. So for example, within the Learning tab, we can see that there is what we call a panel or a bucket for all of our SOL, VAAP, and VGLA information. And there's a number of different reports, in fact currently 29 different reports that are available to help us inform us of our SOL results. Another location where you can access preliminary data through the testing window is in the responsive instruction tools. And then for many administrators, they will be interested to know that on the Planning tab, SOL results can also be found within this panel called Accreditation and Federal Accountability, as well as the School Achievement panel, where we can start to see some benchmarking opportunities between schools, as well as being able to take a look at the results through the Instructional Planning Tool workbook once the test window has closed. So here are some benefits of helping to help your staff utilize the reports through EDSL. For example, the Expedited Retake Planning Workbook, which is one of the most high leverage tools during this time of the year, are updated nightly. Within EDSL, we have secure data in that it requires teachers to log on using their username and password. The majority of the data is updated nightly, including the SOL preliminary data through the testing window. It's accessible to all staff, and the data travels with the student, not the school. So the information that you will find within the Expedited Retake Planning Workbook is the same as what you will find with the SOL sorter. And the beautiful thing about this particular tool is that, as opposed to in the past, there's no one who needs to take the raw extract files and feed them into the wonderful once existing SOL sorter. By the way, if your school used the SOL sorter in the past, that tool has now been sunsetted because the functionality of the SOL sorter has been built up under EDSL through the Expedited Retake Planning Workbook. In the Expedited Retake Planning Workbook, what you will see on the top are 3 different tabs. The 3 different tabs provide different opportunities or different views of how the data is visualized. The first one, the school level summary, is what you're seeing here. On the next slide, you'll see the individual student level, and every workbook always provides a supporting documents page that helps you to know how the values are calculated, when the data was last updated, as well as information on the general functionality of the tool. What we can see here is that you have the ability to filter this report by your particular school name or any other school name within the district, the subject, the test name, the test level, which would be, for example, the test level and the grade level often match. However, for example, in secondary schools, what we'll see is that the test level may vary from the student grade level, because we know, for example, that there are multiple different grade level students who take the same test for Algebra 1 or for geometry, that kind of thing. So what you'll see here then are what we call preliminary unadjusted pass rates. This is strictly the number of students who have passed over the number of students who have taken to create this pass percentage. So what we are looking at is unadjusted pass rates. In the individual student level view, the key to populating this tool is that you have to click on your school's name. If you do not click on your school's name, then no data will populate in these two areas. So by clicking on your school's name, and you can only access the data of your school, because in this particular report we can see all the way down to student name. So by clicking on your school's name, the data will populate both in the top section where we're looking at the distribution of the test strands, and also in the bottom, the student information on the scaled score within each of the strands. So once the data populates, basically what you'll see for each test is the standards year in which they were ratified, so which standards are being assessed. You'll see the name of the reporting category as well as a fraction of the number of items that were assessed out of the total on the test. So for example, there were 15 items out of 50 in equations and inequalities. For this particular reporting category, we see that about 63% of the students scored above a scaled score of 30, so they showed proficiency, as opposed to 37% of students that scored below a scaled score of 30. You can actually filter for the students who scored only below 30 in a particular strand by clicking on this red area. When you click on this red area, it will filter this individual student results below to illuminate only the students who scored below a scaled score of 30 in this area. A couple of other pieces. When you hover over these areas, you'll see some active data, one of which is a link to some remediation plans or resources within VDOE. Down the left-hand side, what we see are filters. So you can filter by changing the scope of the overall tests that you want to take a look at. A recommendation is that you might want to change this 0 value to a 375. You do this by clicking on this value and typing over it. So you might want to narrow the scope from 375 to 399 to give you your expedited retake range. You can filter by subject, test level name. Another filter I'd like to bring your attention to, though, is the strand scaled score at or above 30. By clicking on No, you're looking at students who are not above the scaled score of 30 and therefore are below. This will help to also filter the individual student strand scale score report at the bottom. If you desire, you can also filter by various different subgroups. So essentially at the bottom, once you've narrowed the expedited retake range here and then selected No for the strand scaled score at or below 30, for those not below, for those not above 30, so you want them below 30, what you're going to get is a list of students who need expedited retakes as well as their target area of need for remediation. You can actually print this report by selecting the student names, and when you do this, you'll see that there's a print option. So once again, the individual student level report gives you your overall strand distribution. It gives you the ability to see student strand scores, as well as filter for targeted needs. The expedited retake report, also in EDSL, provides similar information. However, it's listed more out in like a tabular form as opposed to visualized in a graph. So in this particular report, you need or are required to complete all of the various different starred categories. For example, the current attending school. You can either choose to run the report by grade level or teacher. So we find for elementary, grade level works as opposed to teacher for secondary schools. You can also take a look at the current grade level, so all students taking the test, or you can filter for various different grade levels. The particular area which grade level tests they're taking. For secondary, those would be end of course. If they are in the high school area, what the test name is, or even down to the strand category name if you desire. And then this is an important filter. You can either run the report for just those needing expedited retakes, for all failing students, or for all students tested. Once you hit the view report, what you'll see is a report that looks like this. So here you can see that you have some student identifiable information, as well as the child's test scaled score and their scaled scores within each reporting category. If the strand score is below a scaled score of 30, it appears in red text as opposed to black text. So this is also a very helpful report for teachers to be able to access to know how students did and what areas of remediation might be needed. Lastly, the responsive instruction tools, the responsive instruction worksheet and foresight tools have the ability to be able to see SOL data. The values that show on the face of the cell are the highest value for the most recent test that the child has taken. So for example, once the child has taken a retake, if that retake test is higher than the initial value, then that's what's going to show on the face of the cell. So you can sort these columns by clicking on the column headers. You click them once to sort them descending and again to click them ascending. If you decide to choose an area of focus, for example, I chose the area of focus of reading, what you can see here is that the columns have now filtered to show student demographic information as well as some reading data. You'll also see that there is a filter called SOL reading, and by clicking on this you can filter for what we call bubble students, which are students who scored between 375 and 419. These are students who might need a bit more support as you move through next school year, and for the purpose of where we are right now, it's helpful to know these students prior to testing so that you can give them just a little bit of extra support before going into the test. When you click on any SOL face value of the cell, you can actually see the student's longitudinal test history. So for example, this is a current sitting 5th grader whose most recent test was a 4th grade test. You can see that the child retook the test in 4th grade because we have 2 test values here. And the key to maximizing EDSL is if it's blue, you click on it. So by clicking on this hyperlink, we can actually see the scaled scores for each child's test results. This gives you basically longitudinal test history within the responsive instruction and responsive instruction foresight tools. The test values, which we'll be updating nightly through the SOL testing window, again, we need to be mindful that these are preliminary results. Once you've clicked on the command center, what you will see is that there are reports that have been grouped from within our district, or FCPS. For example, you want to click on the Preliminary Accreditation Predictions report. This is sometimes known as that speed dial report, which helps us to look at preliminary accreditation predictions by school. You can also see the preliminary federal accountability predictions, as well as the retake analysis tool, which you've already explored, and then you can take a look at SOL trends over the last 3 years for FAMO accountability. Within the VDOE accreditation section, you're able to see those preliminary accreditation data reports. These are reports that are often used for SIIP reflection. And then in the FAMO report area, you might want to check out this final FAMO detail report. This helps you to see the FAMO calculations by the various different subgroups, like GAP 1, GAP 2, GAP 3, and the various different subgroups as identified through FAMO. So the literature around helping to build data-informed cultures indicates that when we have people who are data leaders, those are people who are knowledgeable in how to access and use data for improving student success through improved instruction, coupled with instructional leaders or practitioners that are very masterful. This can really help us to have empowered teams to ultimately help students be able to perform their best on their expedited retakes. So I ask for you to consider reflection. Which of these reports might be most useful for your school in helping to identify students for expedited retakes, helping to remediate students by determining their greatest area of need for expedited retakes, and then tracking success rates on expedited retakes as you move through the testing window.